She had spent 15 years building one of cable television's most recognizable renovation brands, and it ended on the exact day it was supposed to begin again. Nicole Curtis, the woman who had scraped together a cleaning business from scratch, raised two sons largely alone, and fought HGTV's own network politics to keep her show alive, lost her entire television platform in a single afternoon. One video, filmed 4 years earlier, released the morning her show came back. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just what happened to Nicole Curtis, but why the story of how she got here is far more layered than anyone on either side of this controversy is willing to admit. Before there was a television show, before there was a network deal, before there was a brand worth millions, there was a girl from Lake Orion, Michigan, who used to drive to old neighborhoods just to stare at houses. Lake Orion is a small town about 40 miles north of Detroit. Nicole Curtis was born there in August 1976, the daughter of Rod and Joni Curtis, who ran a garbage collection business. That detail matters more than it might seem. A family that handles what other people throw away develops a particular relationship with the idea of value. What's broken is not necessarily worthless. What others abandon is not necessarily gone. She graduated from Lake Orion High School in 1994 and then spent the next few years bouncing between colleges, Georgia, Florida, and eventually back to Michigan. She tried pre-law, then switched to education. Neither fully stuck. What was building quietly was something harder to name. A restlessness, a refusal to accept that old things needed to be demolished to make way for new ones. The moment that crystallized everything came years earlier, when her great-grandmother's 1890s home was sold outside the family. Curtis was still in high school. She remembered standing there, stunned that nobody was fighting to keep it. "Why isn't anyone buying this house?" she said. Nobody had an answer. The house went to strangers, and she carried that question forward for the rest of her life. Then life interrupted, the way it tends to. She got pregnant with her first son, Ethan, in 1997, while still in college. Suddenly, she was a single mother with no degree, no savings, and a baby who needed feeding. What she did next says everything about the woman who would eventually walk onto national television and refuse to be anything other than exactly herself. Most people who end up on cable renovation shows got there through design school, or through a family business, or through being married to someone who knew an executive producer. Nicole Curtis got there by scrubbing floors. In 1998, she started a cleaning business. She named it Mrs. Clean & Co. and put the logo on her car and drove around Metro Detroit picking up clients. She later described the reaction from people around her. Some laughed that I was so proud I just cleaned houses. She kept cleaning anyway. The money from Mrs. Clean & Co. paid her bills and eventually helped her purchase her first property. She also worked as a waitress and for a stretch at Hooters, where she later said she learned more about business by eavesdropping on the conversations of CEOs who came in for lunch than she had in any classroom. She was also earning her real estate license during this period, not because someone suggested it, because she had already decided that if nobody else was going to save these old houses, she was going to do it herself. She became a licensed realtor in Minneapolis, started buying distressed properties, and began restoring them to something close to what they once were. No open-concept demolitions, no gray quartz countertops. Original trim, restored floors, preserved details. She wasn't flipping houses. She was rescuing them. The cleaning business, the waitressing, the real estate license, these weren't stepping stones she planned. They were survival decisions that turned out to be an education. By the time a production company came knocking, Nicole Curtis had already been doing this work for over a decade without a camera in sight. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me because this next part is why the whole story matters. The show that would define her career and eventually destroy her network relationship debuted on the DIY network on October 14, 2010. Its premise was as counterintuitive as its host. In an era when renovation television was defined by open-plan living rooms and staged kitchens, here was a woman who refused to knock a single wall down unless she absolutely had to. Rehab Addict was polarizing from the start, not because of controversy, but because Curtis's philosophy ran directly against what was popular. She was loud about it, she argued on camera, she pushed back against clients who wanted to modernize. She did not perform the warm, agreeable persona that cable networks usually required of their female hosts. Audiences responded to that immediately. By season 4, in January 2014, the show had moved to HGTV's primetime schedule. Curtis was now one of the network's recognizable faces. Her projects were mostly concentrated in Minneapolis and Detroit, two cities filled with historic housing stock that had been neglected for decades. She wasn't working in the suburbs. She wasn't renovating beautiful homes. She was walking into buildings with collapsed ceilings and black mold and structural damage, and she was bringing them back. In 2016, she published a memoir, Better Than New, which became a New York Times bestseller. The book told the story you've been hearing in this video: the cleaning business, the single motherhood, the real estate journey, the houses that nobody else wanted. Readers responded because it wasn't the story of someone who had been handed an opportunity. It was the story of someone who had manufactured one from nothing. But while all of this was playing out professionally, her personal life had become significantly more complicated. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. Nicole Curtis had two sons from two different relationships. Ethan, her eldest, born in 1997 with her ex, Stephen Cimini, and Harper, born in May 2015 with Shane McGuire, a businessman she had dated on and off before the pregnancy ended the relationship. What followed over the next several years was one of the most publicly documented custody disputes in HGTV history. Not because either party wanted it public, but because court documents are public record, and reporters were paying attention. McGuire filed for joint custody and paternity confirmation in late 2015. The DNA test confirmed what Curtis already knew. A judge granted visitation rights when Harper was just 6 months old. Curtis later told People that having her baby taken away twice a week for scheduled visits was the most horrific moment of those years. She described Harper as a newborn who had never been away from her, and the forced separations as genuinely traumatic for both of them. The legal conflict escalated repeatedly. McGuire filed 6 separate motions alleging Curtis was denying him court-ordered parenting time. Curtis countered with her own allegations. At one point, the case reached a point where Curtis was required to demonstrate breast milk production in front of a court-appointed third party, a detail she discussed publicly on Instagram, calling it one of the most dehumanizing moments she had experienced. In October 2018, they reached a joint custody agreement. Curtis agreed to put $250,000 into a trust for Harper, tied to McGuire's purchase of a home near Curtis's then California residence. Joint physical and legal custody was established. It did not end there. In 2022, they were back in court again, McGuire arguing that Harper was traveling too much and missing school. The judge sided with him. Curtis was ordered to pay missed parenting time and legal fees. By September 2023, remaining issues were reported as resolved. Then, as recently as June 2026, McGuire filed yet another motion, this time asking for a week-on, week-off arrangement, arguing the current custody schedule was creating ongoing instability for their now 10-year-old son. The legal history between these two parents spans over a decade, and it is still not finished. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. Season 8 of Rehab Addict ended in late 2018, and then for years Nicole Curtis was largely gone from HGTV. She wasn't gone from the work. She continued buying and renovating properties. She developed her own production company. She maintained a social media presence. But the television partnership went quiet. And for the core audience who had watched her from the beginning, that silence was noticeable. In a June 2025 interview, Curtis explained the hiatus by saying she'd continued renovating and producing during the gap, but that getting a house ready to the level required for television took considerably longer than viewers might expect. She had also been dealing with a personal setback she chose not to name publicly, something she described only as a period of significant disruption that preceded a spontaneous trip to Paris in July 2022. She bought a last-minute flight with $100 in her pocket, she said, and that trip became the turning point that led her back to making the show. In June 2025, Season 9 of Rehab Addict premiered on HGTV, 3 years after that Paris moment, and nearly 7 years after the previous season. Curtis announced it on social media with characteristic energy, writing that they said it would never work, and that she didn't need to think about who she was because she already knew. 2 episodes aired in July 2025. Then Curtis made an unusual call. She pulled the remaining episodes herself. She described it as an executive decision, a choice to hold the rest until the fall, rather than air them over the summer. HGTV agreed. The remaining Season 9 episodes were rescheduled for February 11, 2026. On February 7th, 4 days before the scheduled premiere, Curtis posted to Instagram announcing the return date. She asked her followers to share the post. She described it as a moment she had been waiting for. What she did not know, or what she may have suspected and hoped wouldn't happen, was what was coming on the morning of February 11. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around her saw coming. February 11th, 2026. The day Rehab Addict was scheduled to return to HGTV screens for the final run of Season 9. That morning, before a single episode aired, a video surfaced online. It had been published by a tabloid outlet, and it showed Nicole Curtis on set, reportedly during filming in 2022, struggling with electrical wiring during a renovation. In the clip, she became frustrated, and in that moment of frustration she used a racial slur. Then she immediately caught herself, her exact words, caught on camera. "What the fine is that I just said?" She turned to a crew member named Nick and asked him to delete the footage. Then she said 3 more words under her breath that communicated everything about how she understood what had just happened. The footage was 4 years old. It had never aired. Someone on the production side had retained it and sold it to a tabloid, timed, according to Curtis herself, to land on the precise morning her show came back. HGTV moved within hours. The network issued a statement confirming it had been made aware of the footage and that the language used did not align with its values. The series was removed from all HGTV platforms, including HBO Max and Discovery Plus. The cancellation was total. 15 years of episodes, gone from streaming. Curtis responded in 2 stages. A brief statement to a media outlet in which she said the word was not part of her vocabulary and had never been, and that she apologized to everyone. Then a longer post on Instagram the following day, in which she acknowledged the moment fully and said she was filled with remorse and regret, just as much as I was 1 second after that word was said 4 years ago. She said there was no excuse. She said she was not a victim. And then she made a claim that has remained disputed, that the footage had been stolen, then manipulated, edited, and sold to a tabloid, specifically to coincide with her return to television. Whether the timing was coincidental or engineered, the result was the same. The show was gone. The network relationship was over. Curtis's public statement after the firing said her focus was not on her career. It was on her family and her community, the people who truly know my character and where my heart is. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What she did instead is the part nobody talks about. As of mid-2026, Nicole Curtis no longer has a television home. She has not announced a new network deal. She has not been confirmed for any streaming project. What she has done is maintain a presence on social media, where her audience, built over 15 years, still exists and still engages. The properties remain. She owns multiple historic homes in Michigan, several of which have been converted into short-term rental properties through Airbnb. The renovation work, which was always the core of what she did, can continue without HGTV. It has always been able to continue without HGTV. That is, in some ways, the most overlooked part of this entire story. The television show was never the business. It was the marketing for the business. Her net worth, estimated at between $7 and $8 million as of 2026, is tied to real estate holdings, not to licensing fees or network contracts. The show is gone. The houses are not. What remains unresolved is the legal situation with her youngest son's father. As recently as June 2026, Shane McGuire returned to court seeking a modified custody arrangement, a week-on, week-off schedule that he argues would reduce the ongoing conflict and instability Harper has been exposed to throughout his childhood. That case is pending. Nicole Curtis built everything she has by refusing to accept that something broken could not be repaired. Whether that philosophy extends to what has just happened to her public life is a question nobody can answer yet, including probably her. The woman who spent 20 years saving houses that everyone else had given up on ended 2026 watching her own story get dismantled in a single morning. The question this leaves, the one that actually matters, is whether the person and the principles are the same thing, or whether it is possible to believe in something deeply and still fall short of it in a single unguarded moment. What comes next for Nicole Curtis is genuinely unclear. She still owns the properties. She still holds the knowledge. She still has the audience. Whether a network will take that call is a different question. The independent route, YouTube, social media, short-form renovation content, is available to her in a way it simply wasn't when she started. She has been doing the work longer than the show existed. She could keep doing it without a camera crew. But that is not really the question this story is asking. The real question is this: do you think what Nicole Curtis said on that job site in 2022 is who she is, Or do you think it was a moment that doesn't define a person's full 25-year record? Drop your answer below, because people are genuinely split on this one.